Canada is striking back with its own tariff measures in Trump's trade war that he has launched against the world.
Repeated Trump's statement by saying that Canada would be economically better off as a 51st state.
It's crazy.
In English?
His point is crazy. That's it.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has directed the Defense Ministry to review a $13.2 billion F-35 fighter jet deal signed with the US.
Canada's cry of enough is enough has been one of the most talked about topics in the Northern Hemisphere in recent days. The country is fed up with United States President Donald Trump's tariff moves, post-North American Free Trade Agreement trade pressures, and energy disputes. And now we move to a completely different dimension. Canada is preparing to suspend its $13 billion F-35 fighter jet deal. This has triggered a new round of tensions between Washington and Ottawa. But why is Canada taking such a huge decision? What does it mean to turn to Europe? Let's take a closer look at what is happening. Canada has long been cornered by the Trump administration's tough trade policies. Tariffs on steel and aluminum have hit the country's strongest exports. Then Trump's new outbursts sparked debates on everything from dairy to forest products. As if all this was not enough, now the United States-Canada defense cooperation is cracking. The Canadian Defense Ministry was planning to buy 88 F-35 Lightning II fighter jets from the United States. But the fate of this deal is now in doubt. Trump's refusal to back down on his tariff policies is crippling the F-35 project, Canadian officials say. The recently discussed question of whether to switch to European-made fighter jets is gaining seriousness. This means that Canada may follow a different path, even in transatlantic alliances. On March 10, 2025, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said in an official statement, "Our country's strategic interests will never be shaped by unilateral pressure or threats." These words
We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight.
were interpreted as a very harsh signal for those wondering about the future of the F-35 project. Although there was no direct reaction from the Washington administration after Carney's statement, some American sources started to circulate rumors that different sanctions may be on the agenda if Canada does not step back. Prime Minister Carney is known for his meticulous analysis of economic data as a former central bank governor. Although the cost of shelving a giant defense project like the F-35 would be high, there are signs that Carney is determined enough to take the risk. On March 12, 2025, in a meeting at the Canadian Defense Ministry building, which received limited press coverage, Carney reportedly agreed that withdrawal from the project is inevitable unless some guarantees are offered. Ottawa is considering possible alternatives to Lockheed Martin's 19 billion Canadian dollars, about $13.2 billion purchase of the fifth-generation jet fighter. Defense Minister Bill Blair said hours after being reappointed by new Prime Minister Mark Carney. Lockheed Martin said on Saturday that it valued its partnership with the Royal Canadian Air Force, but that questions about F-35 procurement were best handled by the United States and Canadian governments. However, Blair's remarks suggest that the first batch of F-35s could be accepted, but the rest of the fleet could be made up of European aircraft, such as the Swedish-built Saab Gripen. Flying a mixed fleet of fighter jets, on the other hand, has long been opposed by the Air Force, which would require two different training regimes, separate hangars and infrastructure, and a different supply chain, a much more costly prospect. Canada is actively exploring potential alternatives to the United States-built F-35 stealth fighter, and will be in discussions with rival aircraft manufacturers, said Canadian Defense Minister Bill Blair. While this may seem like a weapons project, what lies underneath is the balance of power in North America and Canada's quest to protect its own interests. Defense partnerships are meaningful as long as they are based on mutual trust and respect, Carney said in his official statement dated March 10, 2025, implicitly criticizing the American side. Canada's resentment against the United States has been building, especially over the last few years, due to trade disputes, tariffs, and strategic moves. The outbreak of this accumulation over the F-35 project justifies experts who say tensions were inevitable. Some American news channels have commented that Canada's military capacity could suffer serious weakness without the F-35. However, some people close to the Ottawa administration said, the resources we have poured into this project for years will not be wasted. We can move forward with European alternatives or domestic defense initiatives. The Carney government's failure to present a public strategy on this issue raises the question, is there a secret plan in the works? Concepts such as sovereignty and self-determination, which Prime Minister Carney frequently mentions in his statements, are read as signs that Canada has darkened its eyes this time. According to leaks from the Prime Minister's office, if the United States does not take the expected steps on tariffs and other economic restrictions, Ottawa is ready to talk not only about canceling the F-35, but also about moving independently from the United States in many areas. This is where the ongoing negotiations with Europe become important. On March 5, 2025, the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs issued an official statement saying that new cooperation opportunities are being discussed with our partners on the other side of the Atlantic. The talks, which are being held behind closed doors with some European defense companies and government representatives, involve next-generation aircraft and integrated defense systems, possibly as an alternative to the F-35. The extent of these contacts has not yet been made public, but it is clear that Canada wants to translate its anger at the United States into practical steps. Some American senators close to Trump have said that Canada's economic interests depend on the United States market. That's why Ottawa is being dragged into an unnecessary adventure. The Carney government's response was not delayed. On March 7, 2025, the Department of Defense issued a brief bulletin stating that Canada's economy is built on diversity and strong financial foundations. Sovereignty and independence trump commercial pressures. This response shows that Ottawa has no intention of backing down in the process leading up to the F-35 cancellation. Apart from the F-35 project, there is also talk of projects that Canada can carry out independently or with European partners in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence-based defense systems. On March 6, 2025, a report titled Risks of Foreign Dependence in Next-Generation Technologies was allegedly presented at a session held at the Ministry of Defense. One of the most talked about details in the lobbies is that the report includes the note, dependence on a single country may lead to strategic dilemmas in the long term. This shows that the Carney government, instead of appearing sympathetic to the United States, is preparing B and C plans in every field. Trump's America First policy has repeatedly irritated neighboring Canada, sometimes in agricultural products, sometimes in the energy sector, sometimes in automotive parts. The Ottawa administration has repeatedly expressed its reaction. We are the largest trading partner of the United States, but they treat us like a threat. Despite intensive negotiations between the parties in 2024 and early 2025, no agreement on tariffs was reached. In addition, Canada is uncomfortable with the changing national defense priorities of the United States. Everything had already piled up until the F-35 issue. The two so-called friends and allies are playing diplomatic chess. While Trump is pushing Ottawa by saying, I will withdraw the customs exemptions we have granted, Canada is showing the we will retaliate card. Now, threatening to cancel the F-35 deal is one of the biggest moves in this chess game. Although some say there is such a supply chain of parts, this cancellation will hit Canada as well. Ottawa seems confident in its decision. So why is the F-35 so important? The F-35 Lightning II is one of the world's most advanced fifth-generation fighter jets. It was developed under the leadership of the United States, with the participation of many allies. Canada was a participant from the very beginning. There was even talk of producing some parts in Canada. Defense experts say the F-35 is one of the most groundbreaking aircraft of the 21st century, with advantages such as no radar in the air and advanced sensors and network connectivity. Therefore, withdrawing from this project will force the Canadian Air Force to look for alternatives in the long term. The modernization of Canada's fighter fleet was essential. The cold climate, vast geography, and proximity to the Arctic region all contribute to the need for a new generation fighter. The F-35, although expensive and difficult to maintain, has been called cutting-edge technology. Now, the decision to cancel it raises concerns about whether Canada will be deprived of this technology. Yet, Ottawa seems to have taken this concern in stride, as it asks, does it make sense to give billions of dollars when Trump is treating us like this? The European option, Eurofighter, Gripen, or Rafale? There has been serious talk of Canada turning to European solutions to replace the F-35. Options such as the Eurofighter Typhoon, the Swedish Gripen, or the French Dassault Rafale are on the table. These jets may not be as advanced as the F-35's stealth technology, but they still offer significant capabilities in modern air combat. Moreover, defense cooperation with Europe could mean pursuing a course independent of the Trump administration. So rapprochement with Europe, how realistic? If Canada opts for aircraft like the Eurofighter, Gripen, or Rafale, defense cooperation with Europe would be strengthened. This could perhaps lead to a new framework agreement with the European Union. Germany and France in particular might like the idea of the support of a country like Canada in the transatlantic axis, even if this move triggers different dynamics within North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It could be a step that Trump haters could support. After all, Europe has also had many tensions with the Trump administration. If we cannot get along with the United States, why should we not cooperate with Europe on military technology, Canadian officials wonder. Of course, this could be a difficult transition in terms of logistics and procurement. Integration into the F-35 program was not easy, but at least there was a United States-Canadian logistics pipeline. If the Eurofighter or Rafale is chosen, it may require a huge investment in pilot training, spare parts, maintenance infrastructure, etc., which would be directed towards Europe. But Canada might be willing to pay the price if the prevailing view is that it is worth the sacrifice rather than be subjected to Trump's constant imposition of policies. On the business side, major corporations and lobbies, worried about burning bridges with the United States, are calling on Ottawa to find a balanced solution. Nevertheless, Carney has put a stop to these calls by saying, "We cannot compromise on strategic issues on the grounds of economic dependence." As one senior bureaucrat put it on March 9, 2025, defense and foreign policy must be discussed on a more substantive basis than short-term profit calculations. This approach suggests that the Carney administration sees things through a completely different lens. Leaks from the Carney government suggest that there are preparations to develop projects to stop our own brain drain if we give up the F-35. Particularly in the aerospace industry, Canadian engineers are said to be seeking support to take part in new projects. It is unclear whether these projects will attract investment from Europe or Asia. Nevertheless, Carney's mention of the goal of creating our own national aerospace industry suggests that the cancellation is not just a reaction to tensions, but part of a larger strategic plan. It remains to be seen how this escalation against the United States will affect the balance in the Arctic. Melting glaciers and the opening of new sea routes in recent years have turned this region into a field of competition between great powers. Canada says this is a natural extension of our territory, while the United States argues we should work together on international transit. This dispute is already feeding many micro-level disagreements. A drastic move, like the cancellation of the F-35, could also deal a blow to the so-called cooperation in the North projects. Even if Canada withdraws from the F-35 project, the United States military presence in the region will continue. If the problems grow, Canada will suffer the most, some argue. The Carney camp, on the other hand, seems to adopt the slogan, "Let's get along with the United States, but let's not compromise our own interests." However, Washington's "you're either with us or you are not" approach makes it difficult to find a middle ground. It remains to be seen whether this deadlock can be resolved with European support, or whether it will become even more complicated. According to some opinion polls, the majority of Canadians are in favor of an independent defense policy, but fear a break in trade ties with the United States. It is precisely on this dilemma that the Carney government is reasoning. It is both strengthening the rhetoric emphasizing independence and avoiding the "we are cutting all ties" narrative that could panic the public. This complex balance suggests that the F-35 issue could take on a new dimension at any moment. According to media reports, prototype drafts of defense agreements with European countries are being worked on. Although French and German companies are frequently mentioned, Canada has not yet publicly announced which companies it might deal with and with what kind of deals. Only the Foreign Minister's statement on March 5, 2025 stated that we will address our defense needs within the framework of a common vision. This ambiguity reinforces the view in the United States that Canada may be bleeding with its European friends. Carney's statement that the rules of the old world no longer apply shows that this showdown goes beyond a mere cancellation of an agreement. As new power centers are emerging in different parts of the world, Canada is trying to position itself in this game. While the United States is still seen as the greatest military and economic power, the imposing approach of the Trump school may be pushing even close allies to seek alternatives. Canada's moves are seen as a concrete example of this trend. What will Trump's reaction be? When Trump hears the news that Canada is canceling the F-35 deal, he is likely to react harshly. On social media platforms, statements such as, "If Canada does this, sanctions will be severe. They will pay a price," can be expected. There are defense industry circles in the United States who say, if Canada does not buy them, we will find new buyers, and there will be no problem in the F-35 market. But United States defense companies do not take the loss of a close and rich buyer like Canada lightly. Billions of dollars of contracts are at stake. On the Lockheed Martin front, statements such as, "We are in shock," may come. In addition, Canada's plan to move towards European aircraft may also affect the transatlantic economic balance. Some American senators might say if Canada does this, let's not give them an advantage in the trade partnership. If this escalates the trade war, it could lead to resolutions such as, let us raise tariffs, penalize steel, etc. It could turn into a diplomatic crisis that escalates step by step. What is the public support and political background in Canada? Public opinion polls in Canada show that the majority of people in Canada say, let us stand more firmly against Trump's aggressive stance. Therefore, even if the government brings the F-35 cancellation to the agenda, it may not draw a big reaction. On the contrary, a stance that says we are protecting our national honor, we are not bowing down to Trump, may find support. Of course, historical ties with the United States worry everyone. Economic relations, border crossings, tourism, there are many dimensions. But the idea that Trump is always threatening, so let us respond, is dominant. This decision seems to be supported especially by people living in the provinces of Ontario and Quebec, that is, in the industrialized regions with large populations. This is because Trump's steel aluminum tariffs hit Ontario the hardest. Quebec's agricultural products also face tariffs in the United States market. This audience finds the approach of, if that's the case, we do not buy United States airplanes fair. There is a kind of retaliation perception. In sum, the possibility of Canada canceling the $13 billion F-35 deal could cause a diplomatic earthquake between Washington and Ottawa. Already strained by Trump's tariffs, this move will further harden relations. If Trump is saying there will be a price, Canada is saying, are we always going to pay the big price? The idea of defense rapprochement with Europe could change the transatlantic balance. What do you think about this? Is Canada really going to shake the United States with such a drastic decision, or is it just trying to strengthen its hand in the bargain? What do you think? Is Canada really on the verge of a giant transformation, or are the moves just a bargaining chip? Will Canada's economy falter if Trump raises tariffs in retaliation, or can it make up the shortfall with deals with Europe? Could a pivot to Europe be a strategic pivot for Canada? Please share your comments, and if you like our content, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us,